Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava again. Welcome to another episode on India International, where we present India's perspective on international affairs. Today let's discuss the Iran nuclear deal, the walkout of US, the unilateral one-sided walkout of US out of the deal, and its repercussions on India. In international community, which is the international community led by America, Iran is considered to be a rogue nation, a nation that supports extremist and terrorist organizations like the Hezbollah and the Hamas, and which also very actively supports the repressive regime of Assad in Syria. And it also pursues a very active nuclear program and a ballistic missiles program. This program of Iran is considered to be a threat to the world security. Incidentally, Iran's nuclear program actually started in the early 70s with the help of the US. It is because of the fallout of the US and Iran that this program was now considered to be an anathema by the world order. But Iran continued pursuing its nuclear program. It got a lot of secret, covert and stealth help from the Dr. Khan rogue network of Pakistan, also from China and North Korea. And by 2015, Iran had got a stockpile of enriched uranium to the tune of 10,000 kilos, which is good enough to make 8 to 10 nuclear bombs at a short notice. It also had almost 19,000 gas centrifuges, which are used to enrich uranium. And this was a threat to world order, because Iran was actively pursuing the development of a nuclear arsenal. After 5 years of very arduous, tenacious negotiations between the Western world and Iran, on 15th July 2015, Iran agreed to a nuclear deal. And the signatories to this deal were the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the EU, Germany. It is these countries which were co-sponsors to the nuclear deal with Iran, wherein Iran agreed to reduce its enriched uranium stockpile to zero. It also agreed to reduce its centrifuges by at least 2/3. And it agreed to dismantle its industrial nuclear arsenal by which bombs could have been produced. When I say dismantle, they agreed not to activate them, which was the heavy water plant and all other such facilities. Under this deal, Iran agreed to do so only for a temporary period of about 15 years. So, after 2030, Iran would have been free to continue build-up of its nuclear armaments. In return for this deal, which was co-sponsored by all these nations, Iran was able to freeze its assets worth $100 billion, which had been blocked by the Western banks. It also was able to start supplying oil to world markets, which gives it revenue to the tune of about $8 billion a month. And Iran was back in the global order. It made a lot of sense for Iran, but the US thinks otherwise. So when Donald Trump came to power, one of his targets to undo the legacy of Barack Obama, who was a signatory to this Iran deal, was to undo this deal. He called this deal as defective to the core. He called it flawed. He said it was one-sided. He said it should never have been signed. And he said it does not do enough to put pressure on Iran to give up its nuclear arms program and also its ballistic missile program. So, in October 2017, Donald Trump refused to certify that Iran was complying with the terms of this deal. Thereafter, on 30th April 2018, Israel and the US said that Iran had not adequately disclosed its nuclear program to the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, because under this nuclear deal that was signed with Iran, Iran was supposed to allow the IAEA to a complete inspection of its nuclear facilities. Israel alleged, along with US, that adequate disclosure was not made by Iran. And on the 8th of May 2018, the US walked away from this deal. It was a unilateral action by the US because all the other co-sponsors, all the other co-signatories to the deal, which includes the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, Germany and EU, they did not walk out from the deal. In fact, their reaction was that Iran is doing all that it needs to do under the agreement, under the deal. There is no question of a one-sided unilateral walkout in such a manner. But Donald Trump stuck to his guns. He said this was a completely one-sided deal which the US should never have signed. It said this deal does not do enough to prevent Iran from permanently pursuing a nuclear arsenal program. He said Iran needs to fully and completely give proof that it has abandoned its nuclear weapons program and also its ballistic missile program. This kind of a withdrawal from an international agreement is not new to Donald Trump. He's done it very often in the past. And this time too, he did it without bothering that everybody else in the world was not siding. And by admitting, he openly says that Iran has been complying with the agreement, but he yet chose to walk away from the agreement. A top American diplomat said something very interesting. He said, every country has a right to undo mistakes of the past. That actually means every country can be dishonorable. A new regime in any country may think something of the past doesn't suit and he walks away from it, which is what Donald Trump did. It is apparent that the US wants a new nuclear deal with Iran. And it is also apparent that it is doing so, or it is asking so, under pressure from its staunchest allies, which is Saudi Arabia and Israel. So when Donald Trump walked away from this Iran nuclear deal, these two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, they said it was a historic move and it displayed courageous leadership. Walking away from an international agreement unilaterally and admitting even that the other country is not defaulting on it, I don't think amounts to some kind of a courageous leadership. It actually shows a very erratic stand on international matters. Iran, on this particular occasion, enjoys the support, the solidarity of the EU nations and all the signatories to the deal except the US. So, in a very confident response to this announcement by Donald Trump, the Iran president said that this kind of a stand of the US is psychological warfare. And he said, no country, at least Iran, will not be willing to renegotiate under the kind of sanctions that Donald Trump is threatening. The Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, he said, nobody can do anything about this. And he asked the Iranians not to be worried. What did Donald Trump do by walking away from this deal? He has told the world, more sanctions are coming on Iran. He says that such kind of biting sanctions will be imposed that Iran or the world has never seen before. And in terms of international business, he has set 4th November as a deadline. And he says, you either do business with Iran or you do business with the US. You can't do business with both. He has asked all the companies in the world, all the countries in the world to withdraw from any kind of trade deals with Iran. These kind of sanctions might get a military reprisal from Iran. The NATO Supreme Commander thinks that Iran could block the Strait of Hormuz from which most of the world oil passes. It could do by mining the strait, it could do by missiles, it could do by manned aircraft, or it could just use its naval boats to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. That would cause chaos in the world order. But America goes ahead. Iran decided, and it's under EU pressure, it has decided that it will not renege on this agreement. So Iran continues to comply with the terms of the agreement which the US has reneged upon. The response of the EU nations was one of condemnation. They condemned the US and they said that this was contrary to international law, it was contrary to international security, and it was contrary to international agreements, which they are right in saying so. But while their countries say so, and while the EU continues to support this agreement that the US has backed away from, their companies started withdrawing from Iran. Daimler-Benz said it will withdraw from Iran by November. Total Fina, the French oil major, is walking out of $100 billion contract from Iran, all under this pressure. And so are European banks. They've started withdrawing from Iran. This kind of a withdrawal is understandable because if it comes to monetary dealings, if it comes to trade, if it comes to business, every company is bound to choose what benefits it the most. And between the US and Iran, there is just no comparison in terms of world trade and world banking. The US has blocked Iran from dealing in any kind of a dollar currency transaction or assets. It has blocked Iran from dealing in any kind of precious metals, including gold, and it has also blocked Iran from now dealing in its oil exports. In other words, the sanctions would start biting. Let's come to India's situation. India is in a very piquant situation, and India is caught in a bind. At the moment, Iran is the second largest oil supplier to India. India has a very friendly relation with Iran, and Indian exporters of tea and rice have a major market in Iran. India enjoys a very good trade relationship as well as political relationship with Iran. Iran has even given access to the Chabahar port to India. India is developing the Chabahar port in Iran, and once it does that, India gets a direct access to landlocked Central Asia without passing through Pakistan. And for India, this is a very strategic interest. India is in a bind. If it stops trading with Iran, it is bound to suffer. And if it doesn't and continues trading with Iran, its relations with the US will suffer. India is being asked to look for alternate sources of oil. The US administration has asked India to stop oil imports from Iran by November and probably to start importing oil from the likes of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq or Venezuela. In the earlier sanctions that came during the Obama administration, in those sanctions on Iran, India did support the sanctions. But at that time, the entire international community had to boycott Iran. This time, it is very different. This time, except for the US, every other nation is supporting Iran. India needs to be probably with the majority, but whether it will be or it can't is a huge question that needs to be answered. And if India stops dealing with Iran, the biggest threat that it faces in this relationship is from China. China has already announced that it does not support this withdrawal of US and it does not support the sanctions that are being imposed. It has asked its companies to continue to invest in a big way in Iran. The Chinese companies will actually start occupying the space that India may be forced to vacate. And this could also mean that China will happily take over the Chabahar port project. And this would be completely to India's detriment. We are told that the Indian authorities, the Indian administration is talking to the Trump administration to see how to not get India into such a bind, which means maybe India will reduce its oil imports from Iran, but it will not completely stop dealing with Iran. Because if India vacates the space in Iran and China moves into it, that is not in the US, it is not in the American interest either. And for that reason, it is hoped that India will not get into such a situation where it has to choose between an Iran and a US and it spoils relation with one of them. Any rupture of a relation between Iran and India is going to be to the benefit of Russia and China, who are the arch enemies of US at the moment. We feel that India might be able to have some way out of it. But whether India gets a way out of it or not, let us look at the larger picture. The larger picture is US already has imposed major trade sanctions with China. Along with this comes the sanctions on Iran. The oil price rise, the oil prices globally are bound to be very volatile and erratic. Currency rates are bound to be erratic. The Iranian rial has already come down to 1 lakh rupees, 1 lakh rials or dollar. That is a major currency depreciation, which has also affected the Turkish lira. It has also affected the Indian rupee. So the world trade markets are going to be in turmoil. And if Iran decides to hit back militarily, even the world security will be in a turmoil. This kind of a unilateral sanction makes no sense. But as Fareed Zakaria says, He says the US now seems to follow a two-step process in international diplomacy. It first threatens and then after it talks. It first engages in bluster and does a flip-flop. See what Trump did with North Korea. He used to call Kim Jong a madman, and thereafter he had talks and he also called him a savior and a leader of his people. Something similar is also already happening with Iran. While on one hand, Trump sent a tweet in bold capital letters telling Iran, do not ever threaten the US again. On the other hand, he is now offering unconditional talks with Iran. Maybe that is a new way in which the US negotiates its world contracts and world agreements and world order. But in doing so, what Donald Trump forgets is US is now becoming known as an erratic, unpredictable, unworthy and undeserving partner, and one that is hostile to international order. And this image of the US is not doing it good. Already, only 30% of the world believes that the US can be an effective global leader, and that is also reflecting on Donald Trump's leadership. We hope that India will be able to get out of this kind of a mess that is headed to only out of good diplomacy and some good wisdom prevailing between Iran, US and India. While the American image is bound to suffer in global markets, India needs to ensure that it is not treated as an unprincipled partner by the likes of Iran, only because just because the US says that everybody must stop dealing with Iran, it doesn't mean that even India is compelled to do so. India needs US as much as US needs India. Let's see how the dice rolls out. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
If you like this video, please share it, and we would love to hear your comments in the comments section down here. Also, please do like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter to get minute-to-minute news updates. For more such shows and videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel.